ladies and gentlemen, to the Virtual Enlightenment Salon of the United States Transhumanist Party. Today is May 17th, 2020. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I'm the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. Present at our virtual salon are several of our officers, including Ben Zion, our vice chairman and 2020 presidential candidate, Pavel Ilin, our secretary, Dan Elton, our director of scholarship, and our special guest is Dr. Bill Merrell, who is the chairman of the Reform Party in the United States. So welcome, Dr. Merrell, to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon. We are quite pleased to have you here with us.
Greetings.
Indeed. So this is an opportunity for us to discuss some of the shared interests that we have as minor political parties in the United States and overcoming this two-party system, the Republican-Democratic duopoly. And we also have joining us our guest, Daniel Yeloshvili, who is the climate advisor to the Ben Zion 2020 campaign. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you.
This is our opportunity to inaugurate some synergies across the, let's say, unconventional political spectrum in the United States, because the conventional political spectrum has really become ossified and has locked down the system, both literally and figuratively, preventing progress from being made. So, Dr. Merrell, I'd like you to introduce yourself, briefly give us an idea of the Reform Party, its history, what it stands for. I think a lot of us know it as the party of Ross Perot, who was one of the most successful minor party candidates in US history. But what has the Reform Party been doing since that time? How has it fared?
Well, we've actually had some ups and downs. And first off, I'll introduce myself. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here. I actually want to thank you, and I apologize for taking a little longer to get on, but I actually do very well with computer meetings. That's why I didn't want to have a bad reputation with you the first meeting. I actually am going to be speaking with you. So first off, I have been involved with the Reform Party since its inception 29 years ago, when it was the United We Stand organization. I've met Ross Perot about 17 to 18 times. I'm very, very sorry of his passing. He was incredibly involved with veterans and veterans benefits. He was also involved in trying to stop the two-party organization that really caused no one else to benefit from it. We actually have a monopoly in the United States where people spend $300 to $500 million to get a job for $200,000 a year. And obviously there's a reason for that, because someone who was making $35,000 a year when they started is now worth $8 to $10 billion after becoming president. Any president in the world right now becomes a multimillionaire just because they have the name president before their names. And I truly don't, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with a lot of the concept that our forefathers actually brought forth to our nation, that we in fact were supposed to in real life. Our intent was to become a democratic nation and not politicize ourselves, but to actually benefit the public. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I own a school in New York. I am the national director for the Reform Party. I was elected 3.5 years ago. My election may or may not be up this November, December, after the election period is over. But I can tell you that we've done a lot of things with the Reform Party that previously did not exist. The Reform Party name has been patented and copyrighted, which took us about 8 years to do. We had a number of fighting on our hands. We run the New York State Party. We're in 11 states currently, and we have ballot access in 9 states across the country. We have a very nice group of people, and when I say a nice group of people, I'm talking about dedicated people that are doing it from their hearts, not from specifically from a paycheck. And there is no money, meaning any dimes or any monies that we receive goes towards the Reform Party, does not go towards any one individual. Even the executive director uh, is a volunteer job. So we, as a party, are strictly volunteer and not for profit in its entirety. Now, I can tell you from a standpoint of the Reform Party, we are a middle, we are a centrist party. We're not a liberal party. We're not a conservative party. We're a centrist party that believes if we have one dime to spend and we have one dime that allows us to spend, we shouldn't spend more than one dime. A lot of people are focusing on social issues. The Reform Party, and I agree with this 100%, but until such time as the Reform Party is able to or instrumental in balancing our budget and getting us back on track financially, we do not deal with social issues because we believe truthfully that people and their social issues, what people do in their bedrooms and what people do behind closed doors and what people do legally behind closed doors is up to them. It's really not up to me. It's not up to anybody else. And truthfully, it would be wonderful if we had no economic issues to deal with and we had a balanced budget and we were doing absolutely so wonderfully we could get involved in every aspect of the world. But in real life, in my opinion, we have so much to do just to balance our budget, just to get us going ahead, just to actually financially benefit what's going on in America, that social issues, in my opinion, really should take a second seat. And that's really one of the focus points of the Reform Party. Now, as far as how the Reform Party has grown, uh, we actually almost rewrote the Reform Party after Pat Buchanan came into the party. And he, unfortunately, in my opinion, decimated a lot of the party and he took over the party. And truthfully, he took over the party for matching funds to pay off a lot of his debt. He did not do what he said he was going to do. He did not spend the millions of dollars he promised that he was going to spend on advertising. And as a result, he spent no advertising whatsoever. And as a result, we did not get matching funds the following year. So, in my opinion, what he did, in my opinion, was unconscionable, but he just wanted to become our presidential elect candidate. And the reality was, it was a financial goal for him. It was not a goal that he truthfully wanted to benefit the party. 10 minutes after the election was over, he actually joined the Republican Party again. And that bothered me, the fact that he made certain promises to us and he reneged on every promise he made. Since then, we have, in fact, focused more on our agenda and our bylaws are much more stringent and they're much more politically sound. And so, such a situation like this cannot occur, that someone can't just come in and take over the party in about 12 seconds. Because unfortunately, we had a lot of good folk who really just did not understand politics. And because they didn't understand the politics of what was going on, they were in a situation where they effectively got the party taken away from them because they didn't know any better. So that's my genre. That's my background. I've been doing this again for 20 plus years with the Reform Party. Uh, I was one of the national executive directors of the Reform Party in New York State before it became the Independence Party under Jack Essenberg. Jack Essenberg has since passed away. Uh, I do not I do not like the concept of what's going on in New York State with the Independence Party that was part of the Reform Party. The Independence Party is a pay for play party. The Independence Party effectively says, if you would like their ticket, give us $5,000 and you can be on their line. On lower ends, the lowest amount that we've seen is they offer it for $500. We're not looking for money for somebody who's looking to become a party member. We're looking for the strength and their resolve and what they're going to do for the constituents where they're running and what they're going to do for the party itself and what they're going to do for the government and what they're going to do for America. And one of my biggest upsets and fears is the fact that people are paying to become politically active in certain areas of the New York State arena, and we refuse to take one dime to offer somebody a political position. I've had people say, well, what is this going to cost me? And I said, what do you mean, what is this going to cost you? You're going to have to run for office. You're going to have to help with collecting petitions. You're going to have to put out advertising. And then I had one gentleman say, but come on, just tell me, how much do I have to give you right now to get the party line? I said, just by asking me that has almost hurt you from getting the party line, because we don't take one penny to get the party line. We want to know the person. We don't want to know if you have an extra $5,000 in your pocket.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
think
Well,
that it's about, I think I've overstepped what I've said, and I was a little wordy, but I wanted to explain to you what has happened in the past
mhm.
and why we as a party are trying to change things in such a way that we're not looking for money, we're looking for change.
Well, thank you for that overview. And there are a lot of statements you made that resonated with me and reminded me of some of our operating principles in the US Transhumanist Party. So we are also an all volunteer organization. As officers, we certainly don't make any money from this. Even the US Transhumanist Party as an organization hasn't accepted any money at this stage, though individual candidates' campaigns have accepted donations. But in terms of our focus is on promoting science, technology, and rational discourse to improve the human condition, and also promoting measures to reform the American electoral system and make it easier for minor political parties to participate, to get ballot access, to be included in the political discourse. And along these lines, we also try to steer away from wedge issues. That doesn't necessarily mean we're silent on all social issues, but for instance, issues like abortion or gun control are those where the US Transhumanist Party doesn't take the left wing position or the right wing position. We try to look at how technology might make those debates obsolete ultimately within the coming decades. And more importantly, though, we're very concerned about the mudslinging that happens in contemporary politics, which has become very much personality oriented and tribalist in the rhetoric. A great example of this is the whole Brett Kavanaugh, Joe Biden series of allegations, where it seems the parties have essentially flip flopped in their outlooks on this matter, depending on which political candidate, in effect, was being accused. And it just shows
Exactly.
that this is not about principles for them, it's about political expediency. And this is what we're trying to overcome. And from your comments, it seems you are very much trying to overcome it as well with the Reform Party.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Mhm.
Now I
So
wanted to go.
go ahead.
I'm not sure how we're structuring this, but I wanted to go back to when you, at the very beginning of what you said, you talked about ballot access. Uh, could you repeat again what the party's status is? Because that's something we are currently struggling with, quite honestly, is all of the ballot access requirements
Oh, the ballot,
for the.
if we have some ballot access that we're on because we've achieved X number of votes in prior years. In
Mm,
other cases, we have individual volunteers, some very good men and women out there that are willing to take a great number of signatures. And even during the coronavirus, they're still willing, with mask in hand, to take signatures. And New York State is having a quandary with that because they asked us to stop taking any signatures for the time being, and they're going to
mm,
be setting up in New York State a different way to set things up,
mm,
because I think their fear is if somebody is taking a ballot and they have the coronavirus, they may in fact cause somebody who is signing a ballot to actually get it. Because in New York State right now, in downstate New York, 1 out of every 5 people has the coronavirus currently.
right. Well, I think the right thing to do would be to waive the requirements of this paper.
I would agree with you
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
They just haven't said that yet.
Yes,
But
indeed, we are considering in the coming weeks a letter writing campaign to the governors of every state in order to persuade them to waive these petition signature requirements, because clearly if it's a danger to public health to collect the petition signatures, but that's the only way to get on the ballot, and you may be prohibited from pursuing currently the only legal way to get on the ballot, that's disenfranchising the minor political parties. That's
I agree with you.
disenfranchising anyone
Yeah.
except the Republicans or the Democrats. So we think this letter writing campaign should be a broader initiative. Anyone who wishes to participate should be able to do that, because that's a common interest we have, not just with every other minor political party, but with the American people more generally, who ought to have more choices than they currently do.
If
I agree.
very quickly, if there are currently restrictions on the ability that third parties like ours have to get on the ballot, can we make use of online petitions to achieve our goals, or is
Is that question to me, sir?
it was
In New
to
York?
Chairman Stoliarov?
Okay.
Yes, so I know a little bit about this since I've researched the ballot access requirements of every state, but the only state I found where online petition signatures have been facilitated is Arizona. And in Arizona, a candidate may receive 50% of his or her petition signatures via their online portal. But I'm not aware of any other state that does that, unless, Dr. Merrell, you have some additional information.
New York is not allowing it. New Jersey is not allowing it. We have done so far a letter writing campaign in both New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and all three governors have told us it's a wait and see, depending upon how many people actually get the coronavirus. Unfortunately, they told us that when they said if the country achieves 1 million or more, we'll really consider it. And now we're at 4.6 million according to the statistical goals. So you would think that when they told me in a letter that said once we achieve 1 million or higher, we'll definitely consider it. Now that we're at 4.6 million, they haven't returned my last letter.
Yes, that's unfortunate. It seems like there needs to be some greater groundswell of public pressure in order to get them to act, because of course these are Republican or Democratic governors, and they have a vested interest in, let's say, preserving the privileged positions of their political parties. Hopefully, there could be some amount of influence if they realize their constituents really want this, that could get them to shift on this matter.
There's also a fear in New York that they're going to have only, instead of true ballot access, they're looking to do uh, mail mail voting only, where you will not technically ever see somebody and you can vote tomorrow. And that's what they're looking to do. And a lot of the ballot, or a lot of the actual candidates, have not even been selected as of yet. And one of my biggest fears is they actually have a ballot right now that says Republican unknown, Democrat unknown. But if you flick the switch for the Democrat, whoever the Democrat becomes will get that vote, even though they don't know who the Democrat is yet.
Yes, that seems to be the exact antithesis of how people should be voting. This is a pure party line voting concept rather than an individual-oriented voting concept, which is what I've always strongly advocated. In every election, I have advised people to research the individual candidates, what they stand for, what their records are, instead of just looking at the letter next to those candidates' names.
I agree.
Mhm.
Bill, you mentioned some of the folks and the history of organizations leading up to the Reform Party. Another one of those moments in Reform Party history that I think people remember is the Reform Party of Minnesota, and Jesse Ventura becoming governor of that state as a Reform Party candidate. What's your impression of Jesse Ventura now? He re-entered the race as a Green. How are you, what's your impression of this presidential race overall?
Well, he effectively with Jesse Ventura, he actually just wants to keep his name in the limelight, and that's what I have found to be the case. I spoke to him on several occasions, and he actually even said to me, he said he wants to effect change, knowing that at this point he will not be elected, but he wants to keep his name out there. He got involved with. Uh, Aliens. He got involved with television shows about the aliens among us. He got involved with a number of other things after leaving the governorship. And I have to tell you, he actually even said that he was not pleased with the Reform Party after they made the changes because he was one of the people who believed in pay as you play is not a bad idea. And I didn't like that. And I didn't like that concept. But again, everyone has a right to their opinion.
So I'm curious, what in your view have been some of the most significant obstacles that the Democrats and Republicans have placed in the way of other political parties?
One of the items happens to be the fact that they in fact appoint the judges and the judiciary for the Board of Elections. And every time we get a ruling against us, it is not a ruling of an actual independent judge. It's a ruling of somebody that was appointed by the Republicans or Democrats that just does not wish us to basically be allowed to compete against them. And I'll give you a good example. We actually paper clipped one of our petitions to a page. Now we paper clipped it to the page plus stapled it, and the law says you must staple it. But the fact that there was a paper clip in addition to a staple, they negated all the names under that paper clip, even though it was stapled. The fact was is nowhere in the law does it allow a paper clip. So therefore, they negated all of the names that were in that paper clip.
Wow. That modus operandi is just pernicious in general, trying to disqualify what are, by all evidence, genuine voter signatures because of this technicality. Who uses paper clips and staples anymore outside of the ossified political and legal systems in any event?
Well, we actually, even to do a write-in ballot, I'll give you a good example. 4 years ago, or almost 4 years ago, we actually had to have our prior national chairman. He had to physically drive the petitions 347 miles before a holiday weekend because they refused to allow him to electronically send it to them, even though the major candidates and the major Republican and Democratic organizations were given individual permission to electronically transfer all of their records electronically. We had to physically drive 300 plus miles to get there. Now he gets there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the sign says gone home early. Do you know that we had to have over 20 people find a person to collect that ballot that he spent 300 miles to drive to present because the person decided to go home early? And they knew we were coming. They told us they would be there till 4:30 and not to be a minute late. Now, he was there at 3:45 and there was a sign on the door that said went home early at 3 o'clock. See you next week.
Yes, that is appalling. It seems that the major political parties are using the cumbersome and inconvenient aspects of the physical world to foil people who actually try to comply with all of the requirements. And it's difficult enough to get all the petition signatures by hand. It would be a lot easier if electronic petition signatures were allowed across the board. But even if somebody goes through all of those hoops, they still try to essentially thwart them based on these technicalities. I know there was an issue with the Green Party in the state of Nevada where they did gather sufficient petition signatures, but the Democrats continued to challenge them in court. And even though the Green Party kept winning the challenges, they were delayed to a sufficient extent that they couldn't qualify in time to be included on the ballot.
Exactly, because they waited until a week after the ballot access rule was over to have a meeting to give them permission, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world when they could have made a decision that hour, that day, that week. They didn't have to wait 4 weeks to make a decision on something they already ruled on.
So, what do you think could alter the state of affairs? What type of change would relegate these kinds of behaviors to the dustbin of history where they belong?
I have absolutely no idea because we have tried everything in our power to affect change, and it just seems to be that we're just almost muddling through to the best we can. And as a volunteer myself, I'm not an expert, but I try my best, I try my hardest, and I can tell you that I don't see anything in the near future that's going to be a magic pill that's going to fix things overnight. But I think hardworking persons like yourself and everyone here today, that's where the change is going to occur. The more people that are standing up and saying enough is enough and we have to change something because the two-party political system is broken. We have to fix it.
Mhm. Yes, indeed. So I'll open up the floor to our other officers. Any ideas that you could offer regarding what could change this predicament would be most welcome. Daniel?
You know, when it comes to the current state of voting on a federal level, but also on a local level, among my greatest concerns is what's going to happen because of the coronavirus. I understand that Senator Amy Klobuchar in the Democratic Party, the former presidential candidate, is starting a campaign now to have nationwide mandatory vote by mail campaign. And if that were to succeed, I think that would deter a potential problem where a lot of states say it's not safe to go out, don't go to the ballots because of the coronavirus, and also we're not going to give you the option to vote by mail. That's the worst case scenario because that's effectively disenfranchisement. And that's why actually, Mr. Merrill, for you, I had the question because I'm vaguely familiar with the Reform Party and its stances, but what I know about it is mostly to do with economic issues. Does the Reform Party have anything to say about the Electoral College and whether or not it needs to be reformed?
Well, I personally understand the concept behind the Electoral College. And I actually understand the rationale and reasoning behind the Electoral College. And I'll give you a good example. In New York State, we have 62 counties. Now, if I decided to go to Co-op City and I decide to go to Starrett City in New York City, these are two very high, you might want to call them projects, you might want to call them lower income housing, but they have over almost 1 million people living in those two facilities. If I got those people to vote in New York State, just those people to vote, they would nullify the other 61 counties in New York State. Just those two condominium complexes voting would nullify the other 61 counties. Good example. The Democratic president won with 75% of the vote in New York State, yet the Democratic president only won 5 counties out of the 62. The problem is there is so many people living in New York City that it actually disenfranchises the other 60 plus counties that want to have a say in what goes on in politics in the state of New York. And that's one of the biggest problems that's going on. And I have to say that if the Electoral College was not in effect, If we allowed a one vote person, do you know that, just think again about what I just said about Starrett City and Co-op City, those two cities alone, and these are not cities, these are effectively nothing more than condos. They're just a condominium complex. They have their own zip code. They would, in fact, negate 17 states in the Midwest because there's more people living in those two condominium complexes than in all 17 states in the Midwest. So if we did that, one state would effectively control the world. And one of the things that people don't realize, that if you look at it, if we look at what happened, when you say that, some people say, well, Hillary Clinton won the election because of the number of people that she got elected. But the reality is, if you look at it from a percentile vote, the Electoral College was correct. Whereas if you look at it from a standpoint of New York State, just the number of people that voted for Hillary Clinton in New York City, in New York State, in the lower income sections, the problem came in when you look at that is that would nullify Arizona, that would nullify Nevada, that would nullify Montana, that would nullify North and South Dakota, that would nullify West Virginia, that would nullify Virginia, that would nullify Florida. I mean, just the number of people that those two condominium complexes can get in would have more votes than those states alone. And it's scary when you think about it. And that's one of the reasons why the Electoral College, I do believe, should be voted on in that capacity.
Well, one of the original rationales for the Electoral College within the Constitution was actually to serve as a check against unbridled majority rule, where the founders wanted some mechanism to prevent the majority from electing a demagogue or a populist. But the way they envisioned the Electoral College was very different from how it ended up operating in practice. They did not envision or welcome the prospect of political parties. The electors were supposed to be a deliberative body who would meet and who would decide who the president would be, but the electors would be in turn elected by the people. But the electors technically had the freedom, and according to the Constitution, still have the freedom to vote however they please for whatever candidate they please. And the way the Electoral College has been mutated, in my view, into an institution that's quite the opposite of what the framers of the Constitution intended, was through this two-party system where each party has its own slate of electors, and states attempt to bind the electors to vote according to that party's nominee. I would say the electors who were truest to the spirit of the Constitution were actually the faithless electors, the individuals who voted for Colin Powell or Ron Paul or Faith Spotted Eagle in the 2016
Exactly.
election. That's what the Electoral College is meant to do. But I see a problem with both pure majority rule and the state-based system that de facto has taken root today. Because with the state-based system, with each state having pledged electors, what happens is certain states become battleground states, places like Ohio or Florida or Pennsylvania, or unfortunately Nevada, where I live. So every election, we are inundated with these disingenuous political ads from the Republicans and the Democrats trying to out mudsling one another. And if this weren't the case, then perhaps that political advertising and campaigning would be distributed more evenly throughout the country, and candidates wouldn't focus so much on turning specific areas into hotspots for what I would say is deleterious activity between the two political parties.
I agree. It's very, very well said.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So we do have a few questions over the course of the session. So one of our viewers, JM, says, when you get to it, please touch on medical research across the board, including but not limited to aging research, a moonshot to cure all disease. And the US Transhumanist Party supports the pursuit of life extension through the progress of science and technology. That is our first core ideal. And we support political reforms that make it easier to do that. Because right now, for instance, the Food and Drug Administration takes on average 10 to 15 years to approve a new treatment. And right now, for the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, while the timeframes have been accelerated, a lot of people are still saying, oh, it will take up to 18 months to get a treatment through the FDA trials. And
if we're lucky.
Right. And this seems to be such an immense barrier to the kinds of changes that we need to see in order for people to live longer, live healthier, and avoid the kind of predicament that our society and our economy are in right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, which stems from lack of preparation, lack of an adequate medical system to respond to this type of illness. So I was curious with regard to where the Reform Party stands on the best way to approach this idea of improving healthcare research. And JM is clarifying this is not just about aging research, it's about rare diseases, genetic diseases, viruses of all kinds, resistant bacteria, all manner of things that can kill us. And of course, if you're ill, if you're dying, you don't have much of a luxury of thinking long term or planning for, let's say, balancing the United States budget or fixing our infrastructure issues or fixing some of our longer term concerns. So how has the Reform Party approached this entire area, and where do you think the Reform Party is going with regard to these issues?
Well, just trying to keep it as succinct as possible, we do believe in federal spending on streamlining and allowing the federal government to assist different manufacturers in creating different medicines to benefit and extend a person's life and actually help in the quality of life, not just extending their life, but extending the quality of their life as well. I mean, there's a lot of pills out there and there's a lot of medicines out there that will extend somebody's life, but the quality of life is still at a number 2 or number 3 level, whereas I would much prefer a lesser length of life if my quality of life was at an 8 or a 9 level. And personally and professionally, the federal government is funding a great deal of this medical research, yet it allows the individual manufacturers to make huge profits once the drug itself has been, in fact, approved by the federal government. Something that the federal government has, in fact, funded. The individual companies have gotten the money from the federal government. They have not spent one penny of their own money. Now, they've put in a lot of their research and a lot of their time, but it's all been funded by the federal government. And the federal government has now approved this drug. The drug goes out, and instead of the drug, which cost them probably 12.5 cents a pill to operate, they're selling the drug for $35 to $40 a pill, or maybe more. And I have actually seen that on many, many drugs. You know, the just penicillin, great example. Penicillin is something that operates at a half a cent a pill, and you cannot buy penicillin for less than $10 a script. So that means somebody is making a 93% profit, even though it's a very inexpensive drug. And I think a 93% profit is too much.
Mhm. Yes, and these are quite valid points. In fact, the US Transhumanist Party has a section in its platform, section 81, which states the United States Transhumanist Party supports reforms to the patent system that prevent the repatenting of drugs and medical devices or the acquisition of any exclusive or monopoly rights over those drugs and devices once they've become generic or entered the public domain, as penicillin has, for instance. Appallingly, many pharmaceutical companies today attempt to repatent drugs that have already entered the public domain, simply because the drugs have been discovered to have effects on a disease different from the ones for which they were originally patented. The result of this is that the price of the repatented drug often spikes by orders of magnitude compared to the price level during the period that the drug was subject to competition. Only a vibrant and competitive market where numerous medical providers can experiment with how to improve particular treatments or create new ones can allow for the rate of progress needed for the people alive today to benefit from radical life extension. And this touches on competition as being the force that drives down these kinds of exorbitant profits. If you have competition, if you have multiple manufacturers striving to get a share of the market, they're going to try to differentiate themselves by driving their costs of production down, by increasing the volume of these drugs and treatments produced, and by seeking to attract consumers. So I think one of the reasons why we have the cost issues that we are experiencing with the medical system is that all of these monopoly privileges are being distributed left and right, not just through the conventional patent system, which gives 20 years of exclusive rights to a manufacturer just because it was the first to file the patent on this drug effectively, but also with this ability to reacquire monopoly rights over previously generic drugs. All of the most egregious examples with Martin Shkreli raising the price of Daraprim by 7,000%, or Mylan, the corporation that really raised the price of the EpiPen. Neither Martin Shkreli nor Mylan had anything to do with developing these treatments. They were just in a position to harvest the so-called economic rents from the exclusive right to manufacture and distribute them. So if you get rid of the exclusivity, I think a lot of this would progress faster. With the COVID-19 pandemic, especially where speed is of the essence, the US Transhumanist Party has proposed, instead of allowing any sort of patents for the vaccines and the treatments, provide bounties to the originators. So whether that be a pharmaceutical company or a DIY startup in a garage, if they create a new innovation, they should just be paid a bounty up front, and then the prerogative to produce these treatments belongs to anyone who is able to do that, whether a private company or a government, because the original innovators have already been rewarded, and now the way to manufacture it would be as open-ended as the way to manufacture a chair or a suit jacket today, and neither of those are patented.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So we've got some additional questions here. So Mike L. asks, when has my state of California actually counted when Lincoln was president? And I think he's referring to the fact that California, while it's the most populous state in the Union, because of the Electoral College and because the population of California heavily leans Democratic in how they vote, essentially, if you're an individual and you're voting in California in the presidential election, you know your state is going to go to the Democratic nominee. So a lot of people there feel disenfranchised.
Same with New York State. We like 75% went towards a Democratic candidate, and several people voted even before the Democratic candidate was even picked the last election.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, I've said quite often that individuals should vote not because they think their votes will affect the outcome of the election, but because it's one of the few prerogatives we have in the political system to actually express are genuine preferences. So if one votes out of a sense of futility by saying, oh, the Democrat will win anyway, so I'll vote for the Democrat, or I can't possibly let either the Republican win or the Democrat win, so I'll vote for the other big party's nominee, then they're throwing their vote away because they're not actually expressing what they genuinely believe. But if one votes for an unconventional candidate who is more closely aligned to oneself, that sends a signal to whomever gets elected that some segment of the populace actually wants this different outcome. So maybe that subtly guides the elected official into implementing policies that those kinds of voters would support. Do you think there's a good chance of persuading more people to vote independently with those kinds of arguments?
I sure as heck hope so, because if that does not occur, the 25 years of my volunteering has been for naught. So I truly believe and hope with all my heart and soul that people do not vote just based on who they think is going to win, and they don't think that voting is going to make a difference, because if enough people voted to make a difference, then a third party candidate would win. And unfortunately, too many people believe that third party candidates can't win. So they discount the third party candidate, even though they know the third party candidate is probably smarter, brighter, and has better ideas and a better handle on what the average person in America needs, wants, and deserves.
Mhm. Absolutely. I
You know, that's
recall, and Ben, I will let you ask your question after this, but first I want to mention the event where you were featured, Ben, as a presidential candidate, our March 4th open debate in Chicago, which was hosted by the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, where we had 18 candidates from 8 different political parties. And hearing every one of them, one could clearly discern that they were more thoughtful, more articulate, and had more substance in their policy views than either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And yet, the public, via the mainstream media, are treated to this circus with Trump versus Biden, who could, let's say, out foible the other in their demeanor and in their rhetoric. But go ahead, Ben.
Yes, yes. And that is an interesting position that the Reform Party is in being the only third party in living memory to have had this sort of a position to be a spoiler in a presidential race. So, you were talking a little bit about that, Bill. And throughout the 1990s in the presidential races, this party was getting 10%, averaging about 10% of the popular vote. And I'm curious, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we are interested in making these kind of inroads in our organizations. And I'm curious what you see was the source of that success. You mentioned Pat Buchanan specifically. After that, Ralph Nader was a presidential candidate in 2004. Now, I'm inclined to believe, and I don't know that everyone at this table would agree, that there is a big vacuum right now. There are these two folks that Gennady mentioned, Joseph Biden and Donald Trump, who represent a fairly narrow spectrum and an awful lot of disenfranchised Sanders supporters out there right now who would probably be inclined to support somebody like a Ralph Nader again. Of course, he's getting up there in years. But what is your impression for bringing those disenfranchised folks back into the fold, or growing organizations like this generally, Dr. Merrell?
Well, on a personal note, I myself truly believe a third party candidate, whether the third party candidate wins or does not win the election, a third party candidate can affect change. Because what I have found is that when we got 16.9% of the vote, even with Ross Perot, a lot of what our party stood for was actually made into law just to try and nullify us as a party, saying, well, we thought of it also. We're going to do what the Reform Party thinks they wanted to do, but we thought of it first. We just haven't been talking about it. And I found that unique, that we got a lot of what we wanted accomplished during the Ross Perot administration. And when I say administration, I'm talking about when he ran the Reform Party, was because the Republicans and Democrats were fearful of people going to a third party. So they agreed with a lot of our stances, and they actually went forward with a lot of our stances. And they did that in an attempt to kind of diffuse us from being a party that was not part of their organization. They wanted to make it sound like, well, you know what, we've already thought of this, we've already done this, and we're going to be doing this anyway. We don't understand why the Reform Party is a necessity or necessary evil. And they actually treated us as the wayward stepchild that didn't deserve to get a vote. But personally and politically, I have to tell you, if we can get somebody with the ability to actually show what can be done in America, I would be all for that individual in all 50 states, and I would be working my butt off, which I have done many times before. And as we all know, as volunteers, what little money we have left over, I have noticed that my wife says, why are you spending so much money for the Reform Party? I said, because I believe in it. And if the money isn't there, the money has to come from somewhere. I mean, for example, we were rejected 6 times in getting the Reform Party, the name patented and trademarked, and our logo patented and trademarked. It took me 3 years with 5 attorneys, and I spent the money myself, and we got the name patented and trademarked. So the name Reform Party is ours. Other people can't use it right now. And I have to tell you, do you know how many people in America have attempted to use the name almost to make it sound like they were the Reform Party that we are? And as a result, that's one of the reasons why we went to the US Patent Office and we spent thousands of dollars in filing. And there was so many different complaints that it took us a long time to get the state and the feds to approve us. And we did get approved, and ultimately we were totally approved, and we have the patent now and we have the trademark. But it takes a lot to get just a little bit accomplished. Whereas if I was a Republican or Democrat, I could walk into an office and 10 minutes later get a signature. And that's a very unfortunate situation that we're in right now.
Mhm. Yes, indeed. And it's interesting because the Transhumanist Party's founder, Zoltan Istvan, who no longer has an active role in our party, but he is the founder, he had the foresight to trademark the term Transhumanist Party at the onset, and it has precisely prevented this kind of usurpation and set up a succession mechanism and a governance mechanism where we're very open to people participating in our organization, but we do inform them, if you want to participate, here are the rules. Here's the structure, and you follow the rules, you follow the structure, and all will be well. And we've had some individuals, some trolls, trying to usurp the Transhumanist Party name. Fortunately, it seems to have come to naught because they're not nearly as well organized as we are, nor are they as inclusive as we are, because they each have their own axis to grind, so to speak, their own very narrow agendas that they're trying to implement.
Well, you guys did something that the Reform Party didn't even think of. But again, hardworking men and women, all volunteers. But what I found was we didn't bring in specialists that knew how the lay of the land and how to get things accomplished. It's been my 4 year tenure as the national chairman, and prior to that, my 6 year tenure as the executive director, that for the past 10 years, my major goal has been in focusing on launching a situation where our party is guaranteed to live, that somebody can't take it over, can't steal it from us, can't represent themselves as the Reform Party, which was even tried in New York State. And due to a technical issue for 8 months, we were fighting a battle, which we ultimately won. But it took us 8 months just to get things accomplished properly. because once we did all the hard work, they figured somebody could jump in and just do what they wanted.
Yes, it is important to be on the guard against such infiltration, particularly when you do have a political party with a certain culture, a certain mode of governance, people who have been there for some time, who understand the principles and the ideas, but you might have another individual with their group of followers who have a very different set of motives, trying to insinuate themselves into the party and completely change its direction. I am certainly well aware of how that may transpire, and we have had occasion to need to respond to that and deflect it and be vigilant against these kinds of actions. So it does seem to be a more universal predicament with organizations, where if you have an organization that has been run well and competently and has been growing, somebody else may try to ride on its coattails, but completely redirect the organization in a way that would not be productive.
I agree with you.
Yes. So we did have some additional interesting comments in the chat. Jason Geringer mentions ranked voting, and ranked preference voting has been very much embedded within the US Transhumanist Party, how we conduct our voting on our platform planks, and how we also conducted our 2019 presidential primary, where we had 9 candidates, and we required all of our members to rank order the candidates. We ended up having 7 rounds of instant runoffs, but the process really enabled a more detailed expression of people's preferences, and it protects against this temptation to vote for the so-called lesser evil. Because if you really dislike a candidate, you could still rank them last, and you could rank what you consider a mediocre candidate to be ahead of that candidate, but you could still put your preferred candidate in the first choice. So what do you think about ranked preference voting? I know it has been implemented in Maine, and I believe some jurisdictions in New York have also utilized it. What do you see as its prospects and its future?
Well, we use a ranked voting process for the Reform Party in New York State with regard to elections. We actually ask people to vote for the number 1 person they wish to be in the position, the number 2 person, and the number 3 person, and we keep it at 3 people. I guess just to make it a little bit easier than if we have 100 people, it'll be a lot more difficult, and we'd be voting, or we'd be measuring the Chads for another 3 months, which I don't want to do. But what we did and what we have done is we have used a voting standard, whereas who would you pick as the first party candidate you would like to see? Who would you pick as a second party candidate? And who would you pick as a third party candidate? And it was introduced at our last national convention before the elections, and we actually did the voting using that concept, using a first tier, a second tier, and a third tier, and it worked out incredibly well. And people seemed to enjoy it; they liked it, and they liked the fact that they seemed to get more out of it, and they were able to involve themselves more, and they were able to feel like they were participating more than just voting once and being done with it.
Yes, indeed. Because when you rank order the candidates, you're more inclined to research them. You're more inclined to actually think carefully about your choices, because it's not just one selection. You have to know the entire field. So even that structure incentivizes people to pay attention and delve into the process more than just perfunctorily voting for one choice.
Absolutely.
All right. So
Can I
moving
ask just
on
one?
to
Can I
another.
just ask one
Yeah,
question? I apologize. Ben, are
sure.
you're running for president?
Yes, that's true. And this is we mentioned our own election process, but my campaign now continues in the form of my platform, the Futurist New Deal for America, which involves 3 central policy planks. I Vote USA, a blockchain voting and e-governance initiative. Also, the middle class freedom dividend, a basic income that derives from the leasing of federal lands, which are held in great number. And finally, Medicare for All Plus, a public health service that aims to do more with less, not only improve our public health outcomes, but also use emerging technology to lower costs and provide a truly 21st century public health outcome. You know, this is something that separates people like ourselves in the techno-futurist community from people in the Democratic Party or other organizations, is that we are dedicated to seeing these longevity outcomes. And we want to make that a bigger part of the conversation about public health, which, you know, people are having these conversations, but we think that that should be a part of it. So I would encourage people to go to transhumanist-party.org/membership. You can sign up and be a member. That's free. That's always been the case. And also check out benzion2020.com. This kind of reform-minded platform, like the Futurist New Deal for America, this was something that we devised to pique the interest of folks like these disaffected Bernie supporters that I mentioned. This was a pretty predictable outcome, that we would be in this situation where two neoliberal candidates would not so dissimilar from one another would be the only choices. And so we want to find ways to speak to all of these economic populists out there and bring something to the table for them. And I think that the Futurist New Deal for America has a lot of that.
Well, I love what I hear, and if I could interject one thing, Ben, we have a convention next month in June. It's going to be a very similar to a Zoom convention. We use WebEx. It's almost identical to Zoom in any case. Personally and professionally, I would like to invite you to potentially be a potential candidate for the Reform Party. And it would be my pleasure to not ask you to pay one penny. I would fund you to actually come to the meeting and discuss your platform and your views and be a potential candidate for the Reform Party ticket.
It's a date. I'd love to. I was
done June 13th.
Yes, that's that would be great fun. I've been looking forward to that event, and also, folks, do check out the Reform Party website, reformparty.org, and June 13th is that event where we've been looking forward to that, and I'm sure there'll be an excellent, wonderful conversations around that event. I want to say, sorry, go on, Bill.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you, so just finish, and I'll have one thing to say. I hate to monopolize meetings. I apologize.
No, just that there's these disaffected progressive voters that I mentioned. You know, they represent a lot of friends of our organization and a lot of people that I've had contact with over the years. People like the Progressive Independent Party, people like the Democratic Socialists. A lot of these people, they're looking for a home right now, and we want to, you know, and we have ways to be reaching out to these people, letting them know that this ticket is that home for them, and I can tell you that that's hundreds of thousands of people who will not be voting for Joseph Biden or Donald Trump, and we can bring those people into the Reform Party and Transhumanist Party organizations and keep them there in the years to come. If we're willing to focus on the kind of message that will resonate with those folks.
And again, I just very quickly, just to let you know, I actually chose, because of the number of people that we're going to have, is I actually am volunteering my WebEx account, which is a pay-for account, and they charge per person that participates. I guess because of the amount of bandwidth, especially if you're going to have 100 plus people, they have to charge you something. So I'm actually paying for that as a donation, and the the electorate had said that anyone that was running on their own platform would have to pay for themselves. And I just want to let you know personally and professionally, I was honored that you asked me to attend this meeting. And as far as I'm concerned, uh, any cost that would be incurred upon you attending the meeting, I will take care of, because I would like you to be able to present your issues to the Reform Party itself.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you, and I'm looking forward to that. And I appreciate you thinking of us. And you know, this part, we are a young party, a little bit younger than your party, but we really we really so thankful that we have contacts with people like yourself, giving us insights into building a national operation and reaching out and because a lot of this, you know, with this frustration that you mentioned, that Gennady mentioned, with the rigors of ballot access and the inability right now because of this a global pandemic situation to do your due diligence in that area. This is just one of many problems that we need to address with electoral reform, and we really do need to have something more like coalitions and a coalition government, and a system that facilitates that and doesn't stymie it at every turn. And so this kind of conversation is the most important of conversations that we could be having. I quickly, yes. So please, reformparty.org, folks, check that out. I look forward to that event on June 13th. I'm going to change the subject just for one moment and say that we have Leo Iguay as our guest for next week's Enlightenment Salon. Leo Iguay is a human rights advocate, a skeptic, author, and noted humanist. Is known for his association with the James Randi Educational Foundation. He is going to be discussing some of these issues in his native Nigeria, and we have a lot of friends over there from the tech and futurist community. Really looking forward to that conversation. I apologize, had to get that in there.
Oh, that's great.
So we have a few more questions in the chat, and Zombie Prodigy states, I've been sub to you for years now, and I'm a leftist at heart, but now that Bernie is out of the race and I refuse to vote for Biden, then I want to confirm that you're a left platform I can vote for. And this is directed to you, Ben. I think this is the kind of voter you were describing who is seeking a political home. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and I want to, you know, we mentioned someone like Ralph Nader. We mentioned this impulse to focus on wedge issues on the part of many liberals and this establishment overall, and that is unfortunate. We do have to think about what people are lacking right now in this moment in history, and we do have to stand for humane economic policies and for truly reform-minded initiatives. And I do believe that the Futurist New Deal for America represents that. You know, we spoke about the 1990s, or one of the most famous political quotes of the 1990s is, read my lips, no new taxes, from George H.W. Bush. And I think that the middle-class freedom dividend does rather represent that in many ways, because we can use these lands, which are held in great number. We can be leasing them, and that can provide this middle-class basic income to all American adults without running into the many impediments that would be required to provide these humane economic initiatives otherwise, and also without the difficulties of dramatically restructuring the tax code, without the difficulties of this. It's an unfortunate reality. This two-party system has everyone around, so we have to find other stratagems that would allow us to circumvent some of those problems. And I think that the middle-class freedom dividend, you know, there's tens of millions of people right now who are not getting a paycheck and who do not have do not even have their work health insurance anymore. And we need to find ways to see that those people are going to be able to recover. You know, there's places on the European continent that have been hit as hard or harder than the US overall, maybe not quite as hard as the state of New York, but many of them have. And, you know, our friends in San Marino and in Italy have an infection rate basically equal to that of the area that you described in Long Island or in Queens. It's very bad. All across New York, it's very bad. And but they have the kinds of humane economic policy initiatives that I described already in place. So they don't have folks going out of doors pointing guns at the air because they do have the necessary safety net to see that they can transition and return to the workforce and be doing good things. We need to see that we stand for things of this kind and all of the reform initiatives that have been described in this conversation as well.
Yes, so you touched on your three major platform points for the Futurist New Deal, and the third of them is essentially a significantly enhanced healthcare system that uses technology and uses the cost savings from technological progress to make healthcare for all available and affordable. And along these lines, JM asks, I know you guys touched on medical research, but could you specifically touch on funding for the NIH, significantly increase or moderately increase? And of course, the US Transhumanist Party has a platform plank on that, and it would seem it would fit into the objective of increasing availability while decreasing cost if research in healthcare innovation, healthcare delivery, cures for diseases can be accelerated. That could lead to lower cost, more favorable outcomes down the road.
Yes, and you know, we've not been in this situation before where tens of trillions of dollars in value was lost in world markets because of a lack of prescience in an area like this. There's been billions, some billions of dollars that have been cut from the national health institutes and from organs of this kind in recent years, and a general lack of interest going back many decades in seeing that this kind of research and these kind of institutions are properly built out, it's not economically conservative to cut these programs of this kind if it results in a near collapse of the economic system. And so we need to recognize the error of our ways and continue to support organizations. You know, it's a shame that Dan has left us because he is a ranking official in the National Institutes of Health. And he might have, I know we've discussed a number of programs that dovetail nicely with these efforts that he has worked on. I don't know if do you recall, Gennady, what was the data science initiative that he had folks signing up for? Do you remember that?
I don't recall immediately, but we can follow up with him on that during a subsequent salon or in between our Virtual Enlightenment salons. I did want to bring to everyone's attention section 77 of the US Transhumanist Party platform, which states, the United States Transhumanist Party supports increases in the budget for the National Institutes of Health. Numerous biotech CEOs have recently made the case to increase the NIH budget because the NIH conducts research that their companies would not be able to invest in, as investments not leading directly to a product would affect the bottom line. 33% of all of the publications from NIH research are cited in corporate patents, so it stimulates new product development. A major driver for economic progress and reducing the suffering of those in pain, the NIH is essentially a public charity that brings us into the future. Whether one supports limited or expansive government, the NIH does not seek to regulate anything nor impose laws on anyone. It exclusively conducts medical research to help the sick. And this platform wording was originated by John Marlowe, one of our members who proposed it back in 2017, and the US Transhumanist Party members adopted that platform plank in one of our votes. So hopefully that answers JM's question with regard to our general outlook toward the NIH. Now, in most of our platform planks, we don't specify particular funding amounts because those are contingent on the kind of work that needs to be performed, the kind of situation we're facing. But I think it would be fair to say there are, in some areas of government spending, more prudent long-term investments, and this is one of them. So when we focus on what to cut from federal spending, we need to look at waste, fraud, and abuse, essentially, because there is plenty of that to cut. But when we look at research that elevates the general level of technological advancement, that is an area where I would be very reluctant to make any cuts, and the US Transhumanist Party supports an expansion of funding.
I'd like to also call back our last two Enlightenment salons where we discussed, at least a fair part of those discussions were devoted to our Buenos Aires initiative. As our listeners know, we have spoken a number of times. Our organizers in Argentina have spoken to the health minister of Buenos Aires. We've had meetings with the mayor, the party leader down there, and we have a proposal before them that will be heard in front of the Argentine Congress for to treat aging as a disease. And the reason that I say this in this context is because it is true that some of these methods remain unproven. We don't have a model of a municipal health service that has a high degree of data science at the center of it. Japan is pushing up to this. Our friends in Estonia are pushing up to this. But we need to try to facilitate this kind of mechanism that could provide personalized medicine, could provide all the preventative measures that we stand for, that could avoid a system where we have many trillions of dollars basically spent on end-of-life care, but have a system that is more thoroughgoing in seeing that people's health is maintained at an earlier stage instead of putting out fires at the end of people's lives. Of course, we never want to begrudge people those healthcare necessaries, but we do need to recognize that this is a system that is flawed and ineffective, and work on public health in a way that is more sensible. And it might seem counterintuitive to people that we're working on these projects in other countries, but we want to use the resources that we have at our disposal as organizers in public health to be, this declaration in Buenos Aires, it won't actually cost the city a lot of money. But what it'll do is turn this city into a hub for emerging biomedicine, and ultimately possibly allow us to court these data science juggernauts and put them at the center of that hub as well.
Yes, indeed. Along these lines, we have a question. How can a person not residing within the US help out with the US Transhumanist Party or any similar international organization or NGO? Well, Ben described one initiative where we are working with officials in Argentina. In fact, we have a foreign ambassador in Argentina, Dr. Chris Manu, and we have foreign ambassadors from many other countries now. If you go to our website at transhumanist-party.org/leadership, you can scroll down to the foreign ambassadors section. We have people in Belarus, Bolivia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Chile, China, Egypt, England, Germany, Hong Kong, India, Japan, Latvia, Nigeria, Scotland, Spain, and Ukraine. And we have some other applications pending right now as well, soon to be finalized. So we have an active contingent of what we call allied members, people who aren't eligible to vote in the United States, but they are eligible to help out the US Transhumanist Party in spreading our ideas throughout the world. And this is about 30% of our membership. So if you go to transhumanist-party.org/membership, you can sign up for free, no matter where you reside. And again, that doesn't give you the ability to vote in a US election, but it does give you the ability to collaborate with us internally and share your ideas and spread these ideas in your country, whether you want to do it as a foreign ambassador or less formally. But if you have, for instance, a desire to set up a discussion group about what are the attitudes toward science and technology and life extension and medical research and political reform in your country, and have it published on our website, please feel free to do that. If you know any government officials in your country and you want to influence them to make a similar declaration of aging as a disease, do that. And of course, you are quite welcome to share any of the resources we have within your country. So we do have a lot of activity in our chat, but I wanted to also hear the thoughts of more of our officers, the conversation that has transpired thus far. So Pavel, do you have any thoughts about anything that has been said?
Oh, sorry. Actually, I have a question to Bill. Like, I checked the website of the Reform Party, and the big focus of this party, it's on the creation of new jobs. And as I understand that the idea of the job is very important in US culture. And how do you think the concept of the job will be transformed in the age of automation and AI?
Well, that's if I could respond, I agree. The jobs that we used to have don't exist anymore. Good friend of mine ran for 37 years. He ran the rollers for New York Times. And in one day, he was told the computer was taking over his job after 47 years. Now, he happens to be a licensed home inspector, and he's going to be teaching for me as well. And he actually took classes at my school, and he actually recreated his life. And he actually happens to be a licensed home inspector with 6 people working for him. And it's not so much that he uh, wasn't able to get another potential job in the same sphere, but he knew eventually those jobs were going to make the way to transition to automation and AI. We understand that. We understand that it doesn't take as many people to do a specific job because of the automation that we have right now. So our goals are trying to help people to get jobs. We have been instrumental in New York State, and New York State has a policy right now that if you are a self-employed individual, not making money, you're making some money, but you're not doing great. Do you know that now, as a self employed individual, you're not paying unemployment insurance on yourself because you're a self employed individual with a business certificate? You can either file under your own name or you can file under a separatist name that says Bill Merrell doing business as. Either way, right now, we have been very fortunate in New York State. New York State has now come up with a policy that if you are a New York State resident and you have an idea, a brand new idea to open up a new company, something you've never done before, they will pay you 37 weeks of unemployment. No questions asked, just to give you the money necessary to make your company a success. And they don't even penalize you on making money in your new company. They want you to make money on your new company. And you can even see it. It's called the SEEP program. It's something that I've been very active with in people who need work. And the fact that they can get money immediately in New York State and they can work out and become a sole proprietor and open up their own company, and the federal government through the state of New York is going to fund it. That, in my opinion, is something that's magnificent. And we have been trying in other states to get the other states to approve it. California is looking to approve it. I know that Illinois has approved something similar. But I can tell you that I know of several hundred people who are now benefiting from not being on welfare, not be on social services, not having to look for a job that's going to pay minimum wage for the rest of their lives. Whereas if they can create a new company and do well, the federal government and the state of New York is funding them for that. And that is something that I would love to see in the entire world, in the entire country. But I'm very pleased that I've been able to help to see it in New York State.
Bill, thank you so much. I myself
I didn't even know if you
in the
guys
city.
even knew about this. I didn't
Yeah,
even know if you guys even knew that this existed.
yes, I live in a city. I never heard about this program, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's kind
Tomorrow
of a
you could
basic
apply.
income.
Yeah, tomorrow you could apply, take a 3-hour course, and they will pay you $600, up to $600 a week while you're opening up your company for the next 36 weeks.
That's great program.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And we've had a lot of conversation in the chat about automation and jobs. There are different perspectives on the subject. Some people want to see jobs automated away in order to enable people to spend their time solely on the work that they consider to have purpose, whether or not it has monetary return necessarily. Now, it would seem to me this is a function of what automation is or is not capable of doing. And let me give you an example. So in the fictional Star Trek society, they have replicators, which are able to manufacture basic consumer goods, whether those be food items or, say, decorative objects. So most of the regular consumer good economy has been replaced by replicators. But if you think about starships like the USS Enterprise, for instance, you still see these huge shipyards where there are technicians working on the ships and on constructing them and maintaining them, because the components of the ships are too large to be produced by replicators. I don't know what kinds of mega scale industrial replicators they have in the Star Trek universe, but clearly the components still need to be assembled. So really, whether there are jobs and who does the jobs or what does the jobs, whether these are people or they're robots, it is a function of technology. There are tasks that need doing in order for humans to live or for humans to live well. And I think the goal should be make the execution of those tasks as easy as possible, as safe as possible, as painless as possible. So it's a good thing that a lot of the old, dangerous, dirty, repetitive factory jobs are being automated away. If jobs are more creative in nature, if they involve an individual's use of higher cognitive faculties, then it would be very difficult to automate those jobs away, even in the age of artificial intelligence. I've made this argument before that right now we have narrow AI systems that are capable of doing some impressive feats within particular domains, like driving a car or playing chess. We do not have artificial general intelligence which can grasp multiple domains or jump across domains. We may have it within a few decades, but until we do, we have to, as humans, still use our higher order faculties to form a more comprehensive picture of the endeavor that we're engaged in. And we will use AI systems in certain tasks, but we still maintain the higher level judgment even needed to determine when to deploy the AI systems, for what purpose, and what are the areas of life that still require the human touch just because we don't have a system for them, or because they are uniquely structured in some way that artificial intelligence can't penetrate yet. So those are my thoughts on jobs and automation, but I think humans are always going to have a role in this economy. We're not going to have a situation where, oh, robots and AI can do everything and humans are just this vast unemployed horde. I think it's going to be more of a symbiotic relationship where the quality of jobs hopefully will improve along with our ability to get more done.
And funding is important too in New York and anywhere. Can I interject one question here, and if you don't mind?
Certainly.
Okay. Does anyone in this room know of a self-employed or an individual in the New York State metropolitan area that's not working because of the pandemic virus?
I'm here.
Okay. Did you apply for PUA funding?
Correct.
Oh, you did apply.
Yes.
Did you get it yet?
Yes.
Okay, so they're giving you the PUA funding, but did you apply for the SEEP program besides?
I never heard about this program.
Okay, it's in your same folder. You know how you have the folder and you have the information before you actually the same folder, just go all the way to the bottom to self-employed action program is the SEEP program. Apply for that and the money they give you will be double.
Interesting.
Because they want you to work, but they want you to do something different. If they know you can't work at what you're doing now, they want you to attempt to do something differently in the New York metropolitan area. And the only thing that they ask you is if they give you 2 years worth of money, you agree to live and stay another 2 years in New York. They don't want you to leave the state and make money for another state or another government. They want you to keep the money here and hire the people here, and that's why they're funding you here.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing it. I
And
participating
you
in
all have my number separately. So Pavel, if you want to call me separately, I'll be more than happy to walk you through it because I even assisted in the development of the program way back when through the Governor's Office on Regulatory Reform. So I'm more than happy to show you what to write and what to fill out and how to do it because the funding's going to come to an end in 15 days if you don't apply.
Yeah, Bill, thank you so much. I participate in an open source community who built an open source project to help the battle of COVID. And we actually struggle with funding because it's all volunteering, all open source, and people still have to like eat something. And this program will definitely help this open source environment ecosystem to thrive.
You could actually create a company just for this, and they would fund it.
We already have a nonprofit company, so yeah. Well,
If you have a company right now, we could have it funded by the Department of Labor, and I can show you how it could be done because it's a brand new company, I'm assuming, because obviously the pandemic is relatively new. So I could show you and help you to have it funded.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I didn't mean to interject, and I apologize for trying in any way. If you think I'm monopolizing anything, I just got very excited because certain things I was able to accomplish, and I'm able to help people with. When I hear somebody who needs it, I just want them to know about it because there's the ones that know about it that get the money, and then there's the ones that don't know about it, don't get the money, and then 10 years later they say, "Wait a minute, why didn't I ever get that money?"
Yes, well, it seems like a lot of great bridges are being built in the course of this conversation, and certainly I'm pleased by it and I encourage it. I did want to also mention another question by JM on a somewhat different subject. JM asks, what are the panelists' thoughts on the CCP and what sort of relationship we should have with them? So the CCP is, I presume, the Chinese Communist Party, and this is a bit of a fraught subject right now because of the whole COVID-19 situation. There are questions about how the Chinese government handled them, and it seems that there's a twofold impression. On the one hand, they were very slow in reacting initially or even acknowledging the nature of the problem, to such an extent that it spread within the Chinese population. But on the other hand, once the wheels of the Chinese Communist Party began to move in the direction of actually suppressing the virus, they took very draconian steps, but those steps did seem to be effective in containing the pandemic largely. They couldn't contain it fully, but they contained the spread within their own boundaries so as to have a much lower death toll than the Western world. And they did have some innovations that the Western world should look at, like the ability to rapidly construct hospitals within 10 days or less, which is what the US Transhumanist Party has been advocating for being done in the US as a way to ensure that there is never a situation where doctors have to decide whom to allow to die, essentially, which unfortunately has been happening in hotspots like New York. So what are everyone's thoughts on this very mixed, let's say, reputation and set of outcomes from the Chinese Communist Party, where they made the correct decisions, where they made the wrong decisions? What could we learn from that?
I'm not sure that we're going to have enough insights into what's transpired in the last few months to speak to all of this right now. I want to quickly say that I am going to have to momentarily switch to audio only, so I do apologize to everyone, but I will remain on the call, but I will drop off a video. I wanted to call back before I do have to do that. The discussion, we were talking with our supporters about these full automation developments, about this futurist outcome that we do see coming in the coming decades, but we're not there yet. And you know what, the program that Bill mentioned and the kinds of protections in general that we're talking about, this is something that's sometimes lost on folks, is that a truly free market economy is one that facilitates small businesses, facilitates partnerships and cooperative businesses over corporations. Right now, corporations our definition of this centers to a very high degree on large multinational concerns, and those kinds of concerns are basically able to micromanage so many institutions, basically be controlling our government. And last year, the Sanders campaign was talking about things like making workers stakeholders in corporations. More recently, there's been a discussion of things like a essential workers bill of rights. But all of these kinds of things are what we have to do to see that we are able to smoothly transition to a world where we are more truly a free market that is able to benefit from that and sustain a middle class, because this oblong relationship that we have with corporations right now in the United States, it's what's led us to this situation where we have so many people just not even able to keep from the door at this moment in history. And it's the difference between a country like Germany or the United States is the fact that we have allowed corporations to undermine the necessaries like a workers' bill of rights, like a second bill of rights, and also define what a market economy is. And unfortunately, that doesn't really involve a lot of people or the good outcomes for the middle class. And so we really need to consider that something like a basic income is maybe just the tip of the iceberg for things like this. We have to look at other protections that will see that we are able to live well as a society and transition into a truly 21st century model, and not hope that this will come in some far off a heavenly future, but see that that the good work is done now, and we build all of these things out. And with that, I will step off the call for a moment, but I am interested to hear this foreign affairs discussion and participate in that as well.
Yes, indeed. So we have had more interactions via the chat over the past few minutes. So Kelly Martin states her recommendation of 3D printed hospitals. I completely agree. There have been discussions within the US Transhumanist Party about micro hospitals as well. They don't have as many beds, but they can be built in more locations. And there have been advances in 3D printing structures. There was a nice 3D printed structure recently, which is the largest of its kind. And I definitely think a lot more research and a lot more investment should be devoted toward 3D printing buildings and 3D printing micro hospitals in the short term. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about the Chinese Communist Party potentially concealing the true death toll of COVID-19. JM says some argue they are claiming low numbers to discredit the West's protocols for dealing with the virus. And then a follow-up comment from JM states, Democratic Taiwan has a democracy and only has 7 reported deaths. It is considered a model. Kelly Martin says, who knows what China's real numbers are? And JM says, independent Chinese news says the numbers could be over 40 times what they claim them to be. Jason Geringer says, CCP is a subject that could take many meetings to go through, probably, especially given that we have such limited information. But there is an interest in essentially hearing the other panelists' thoughts. So, Bill, what are your thoughts on the Chinese Communist Party and how it has handled this COVID-19 situation?
Well, I have to say, there's no doubt in my mind that they have underestimated and underreported their numbers significantly. And a country that had to buy 1.6 million body bags should not explain to us they only have 8 to 10,000 COVID virus people and less have even passed away, when they're now putting in another order for over another million body bags. Now, my question is what is the purpose of that? I mean, are they having parties on the beach where they need it for ice, or in reality, are they just hiding it from the rest of the world and not disclosing in real life the exact tolls? You know, in America, we're coming up with exact numbers. We're giving out the numbers the day they happen. In most parts of the world, we're not getting the true numbers, especially in countries where they're not true democracies. They have a right to put in whatever number they want and whatever number they don't want. Even in Africa, they made a statement that they were not going to test anyone that had already been tested as HIV-2. It's the HIV second stage if they are HIV positive. And the only rationale behind that is because they don't want to spend the 37 cents in testing equipment, because believe it or not, in Africa, that's a very expensive number when the average African makes $1 a day. So it's a very problematic situation, because I do believe we probably have double the number of people in the United States that have the HIV COVID-19 virus, but they haven't been tested. But I do believe that it could be 40 to 80 times that amount in other countries.
And it's interesting too, because of the limitations of testing, we don't necessarily know what the prevalence of the disease is among the untested populations. But as an example, Los Angeles County performed antibody tests that showed the prevalence of COVID-19 antibodies was about 55 times greater than the number of confirmed cases. In New York, it was between 13 and 20 times greater, depending on the area. But on the other hand, Carson City, Nevada, undertook an initiative to test asymptomatic individuals for COVID-19. And there were about 1,800 tests performed. One person was tested positive for COVID-19. So that suggests either wildly differential rates of spread or somehow differential targeting of populations, where in one area the initiative targeted a population that was likely to have the virus, whereas in another area they targeted a population that wasn't. And maybe the answer is COVID-19 just hasn't spread very much to northern Nevada yet compared to those other places. But there are these strange statistical enigmas and of course problems with what's even considered a COVID-19 death. For a long time, people who died at home in New York weren't counted as COVID-19 deaths, but that changed fairly recently, and the death tolls from nursing homes were also underreported. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were these anomalies throughout the world. The big question in my mind is, to what extent is the underestimate in China comparable to that in other parts of the world, or is there really some more significant concealment going on?
Very good point. And I do personally believe that the concealment is absolutely there.
Hmm. Pavel, what are your thoughts about this question?
Well, I believe the Chinese government act as a typical authoritarian government. The same way like Soviet Union tried to hide consequences of the Chernobyl, the same way any other government will try to hide consequences of any catastrophe, any disaster, any pandemic situation.
I agree with you 100%.
So when you have the bureaucracy which not responsible to the population but responsible to their superiors, and the superiors also not responsible to the local population, the people on places they not taking action in interest of the population. They interest in saving their seats, saving their jobs, and which means not to deliver bad news to their superiors.
And don't rock the boat, right?
Don't rock the boat.
It's quite sad that, and you know, just in recent hours, Brazil has surpassed many of the most affected countries in this outbreak in terms of the number of new infections. And this is what you alluded to, Bill, on the African continent. This is we're all on this continuum. And the United States is, we're not counting many of these people who are dying at home, who are dying in hospice or elder care facilities. That's a big number of deaths. We need to have a dedication to testing and a dedication to a great degree of transparency. And it's absolutely true that there are countries that are worse offenders in this lack of transparency. And China is a place that lacks in many dimensions in recent years. But this problem is, it's moved well outside of this temperate zones in the developed world that it had been contained within in the early weeks of the outbreak, and so we really do need to encourage our government to embrace World Health Organization undertakings, and to publicly embrace what it would take to see that the transparency and the political will is there to stop this from becoming an even more catastrophic pandemic outcome. And it's moving in that direction, and it's a horror show on a grand scale.
Yes, indeed. So I think we've had an excellent conversation, wide-ranging, on a number of topics. And we have some promising developments in the months ahead. So I'm very pleased that we were able to have Bill in our Virtual Enlightenment Salon today
Yes,
to discuss potential synergies between the Transhumanist Party and the Reform Party, and generally ways to improve the prospects of minor political parties, hopefully soon to be major political parties in the United States if we can unseat this duopoly. But I would like to provide an opportunity for closing remarks from everyone in our panel today. So Bill, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm going to make it very brief. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for allowing me to speak in your organization. It was not only an honor, but a privilege to be here. I'm glad I was able to enlighten people as to some of the ideas and some of the policies of the Reform Party. I'm also happy that if I was able to give out even one extra person to get extra money that the state of New York is willing to give out, it's something that is there. There's a couple of other things that New York State is doing. In New York State, if you're not approved for an SBA loan, they send you $1,000 check saying, "We're sorry, we can't fund you." Now, why wouldn't, if you know somebody in New York State that's looking for an SBA loan, even if they get rejected, they get $1,000 as an "I'm sorry, we can't fund you." And if they do fund you, it's a 2% loan for 6 years. So either way, it's a win-win, but a lot of people don't take advantage of it because they think it's a lie. They think it's a scam. They think it's a joke. They don't realize that the money is there if you actually know where to look. So if there's anything I can do to help, if anyone knows anyone that they want my assistance, I'm always able to help. As anyone in the Reform Party will tell you, and even outside of the Reform Party, I answer all my calls if I can, or I call back immediately. I'm a pain in the neck because at times because I'm answering 150 to 200 calls while I'm still working. But in real life, I don't mind doing it because I've given myself a job as a volunteer, and I'm going to put it to the best of my ability. I'm going to do everything I need to do to make the job work perfectly. And I think we've been growing by leaps and bounds. We're getting a lot more members than we've had in the past. We have a younger group of members. We used to have a much older group of members. And I think the younger group of members are much more disenfranchised with the concept of what's been going on with the two dominating parties out there. And I truly believe, even in some states where they allow a duality of multiple party votes, we can affect change. And we have, in fact, been able to have commissioners appointed who left the Democratic or Republican Party to be part of the Reform Party, and they won the commissioner's office. We have somebody who's a congressman as a result of us. We have executive leaders in New York. We have assembly persons in New York. We have a lot of people that otherwise would never have been elected had it not been for our party group, our party grassroots operation. I have to say that 3 times fast. It's a tongue twister. But I thank you all, and I really want to say thank you to everyone here. I wish to thank you personally for hosting the meeting, and I appreciate it. And if anyone wishes to speak to me for any reason, I know you have all of my numbers. If you don't, I can give it to you again, and I'll say it out loud. It's 631-563-7720. And if anyone, even in your organization, wishes to speak to me specifically about New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, those are areas and even Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. I also own several ski lodges in Vermont, so I'm very up to date in Vermont with what's going on. So I can help with anything that you need. And if I don't know, the one thing you're going to hear from me is I'm going to say, I don't know, because it makes it a lot easier that I don't have to make it up as I go along. So God bless you all and thank you all. And I want to say God bless your families. And I hope nobody gets sick and everyone in your family, all of your friends are healthy, happy, and they stay COVID virus free.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for those good wishes, as well as your generous offers to help the members of our community, the members of the Transhumanist Party, those watching this video. You definitely have a wealth of insight into some concrete, practical possibilities that people can utilize in the wake of this pandemic. So that is much appreciated. And I think we're going to need to have these kinds of synergies between our organizations as well as with other political parties throughout the United States in order to achieve the system-wide change. Now, Ben, what are some of your closing thoughts for today's discussion?
Yes, sir. I'm thinking about the conversation that we've had here today on the COVID-19 outbreak and on policy initiatives generally, or initiatives in response to this unique set of problems. You know, I remember it was about a month ago that the Surgeon General referred to this COVID-19 outbreak as a Pearl Harbor moment. Surprisingly, a poignant language from a person in that position. They're usually quite staid in their responses. We've struggled to try to contextualize what is happening. We've struggled to try and deal with this ongoing pandemic situation. I've heard people refer to us as being at a stage in history rather like the French Revolution. But I think a good way of looking at this is 1929, at the start of the Great Depression. I believe that what happened from 1929, when the Great Depression began, until 1933, when the New Deal began to be implemented, there was great proliferation of economic populist organizations, including our friends. I interviewed Howard Rushing, who was close friends with Howard Scott, the founder of the technocracy movement. One of those economic populist institutions that at that time, 1930, 1931, took the country by storm. And there were a couple of, and all of those folks, even though they ultimately a lot of that energy went into the New Deal programs, those folks went on to work. A lot of those folks went on to that in that administration and provided the basis for the modern technocratic states that continue to this day. And I think that we are at this moment in history now where we can use the techno-progressive platform like the Futurist New Deal for America to inspire people to see that we will thrive in this difficult moment in history, that we will find new institutions just in the way that this technocratic movement allowed people to start to think of new institutions that had never existed anywhere else in the world before. And I would encourage people to consider to transhumanist-org/membership. You can join anywhere in the world, and it is of course free. Please go to benzion2020.com. The Futurist New Deal for America, I mentioned at some length the middle class freedom dividend, but we want to support also this project of digitalizing of government services and using emerging technology. Another important 20th century idea that always inspires me is the words of R. Buckminster Fuller in describing this word ephemeralization, the ability to do more and more with less and less. This is an important idea for the techno-progressive. We have to not only see that institutions of the present day are run well, but we have to avoid any impulse for techno-sluggishness by allowing emerging technology to be at the center of what is done. And that involves things like e-governance and blockchain voting and digitalization within the public health service. And of course, humane economic policies that are truly of the 21st century. So I thank you for joining us today, Bill, in this discussion. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful time. I do appreciate your patience with us at the top of this call, and I really think it did pay off. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. This has been a great show.
Yes, indeed. And now let us move to Pavel. Pavel, what are your closing thoughts for today?
Well, I think this kind of meeting, when we have a dialogue between different people, between different parties, between different cultures, will help us to build more inclusive, more the better future. It's like I said in my work about othering, like through the dialogue we can see each other, and we can value each other, and we can include each other to the family of we. So I'm glad that we have this dialogue.
Yes, great points, Pavel. Thank you. And I would like to close by giving you a preview of our next weekend's Virtual Enlightenment Salon. We hope to hold these every Sunday for the foreseeable future. Our next guest will be Leo Iguay, who is a Nigerian human rights advocate and humanist, and he has specialized in campaigning against and documenting the impacts of child witchcraft accusations. So he's very much into debunking superstitions and bringing emphasis to their deleterious effects throughout the world. So a friend of rationality, of the scientific way of thinking rather than the superstitious way of thinking. There's still a lot of superstition to combat in Africa. So we will be very pleased to have Dr. Leo Iguay with us next week. And in the meantime,
and I would just also want to interject that we'll be discussing also the hashtag Free Mubarak Bala campaign that is gaining a bit of traction in that country. That is a similar concern. A free thinker, an agnostic or atheist-minded fellow has been targeted in that area. He's been jailed wrongly. And so Leo Iguay, as this skeptic and humanist, is going to update us a little bit on the state Mubarak Bala campaign as well at that time.
So as you can see, we have some great conversations set up going forward, and our virtual enlightenment salons are indeed intended to bring in guests who have interesting perspectives, who hail from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, but with whom we can have this kind of fruitful dialogue and see what bridges can be built, what opportunities for collaboration arise. And until then, I wish everyone all the best. Thank you for participating in our Virtual Enlightenment Salon today. And I look forward to seeing you back here next Sunday.
Thank you all.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody, and we'll see you next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern.